Thanks, Chairman, Minister, fellow participants in this wonderful summer school. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you in this wonderful setting and to have the opportunity to share with you some of my views on current police and law enforcement issues. I'm going to skip the jokes because I'm afraid of the sound man. He's definitely going to cut me off at the end, so I'll skip over that. And I'm not going to rehearse the controversies that we all know about over the last number of months and years. What I will try to do is place them in a broader context so that we have a better idea as to what it is we're dealing with. And then I'll go on to consider some of the factors that may be generating the issues. And then I'll conclude with some suggestions as to how we might go about tackling the root causes. So starting first of all with the context, the policing issues that have been capturing the headlines lately aren't peculiar to us today. They're virtually endemic in all police forces, in all parts of the globe. Of course, we like to look back all misty-eyed at a golden age when Gardaí were exemplars of virtue, untouched by the corrupt practices of the foreigner. But that golden age never existed. Before the force was even fully established, most of the rank and file mutinied against their leaders and against the government. One of the longest serving and certainly the most influential Garda Commissioner was a fascist, and he modelled the force in his own authoritarian ideology. When a High Court judge felt compelled to describe an elite armed Garda unit as an excrescence on the force, the year was 1937, not 2007. And in the 1970s and the 1980s, of course, we had the Heavy Gang and the Kerry Babies debacle, among others. In the 1990s and 2000s, it was impossible to keep up with all the abuses. The Morris Tribunal alone revealed a truly bizarre litany of corruption and incompetence, the likes of which have rarely been seen in the policing of any other common law country in the world. So what we're wrestling with now is not new, even for us. But what's causing it all? Why is it so endemic and persistent? Why can't we stop it or even get on top of it? And as with so much in policing, the answers are many, they're complex, and they're contested. In the limited time I have available, I will focus on two related areas that I think are particularly relevant to us here in Ireland today. The first is a concentration of police power in the hands of central government. And the second is a dramatic expansion of Garda powers over the past 8 years. The concentration of power and authority in the hands of a few seems to be part of our culture. You can see it in the Catholic Church. You can see it in the financial institutions, in the growth of central government, in the emasculation of local government, and so on and so on. So it must seem the natural order of things to have the whole state policed by a single police force, organised in a strict hierarchical pyramidal structure with central government at the apex. But that's not the universal norm in other common law countries. England and Wales, for example, are policed by 43 separate local constabularies. The USA has no less than 18,000 separate law enforcement agencies, most of them small and local. Our national model is the one more closely associated with totalitarian states. And not only that, we combine the civil police function with the state security function in the hands of the Garda, as MacGill very expertly pointed out, and we place that under the direct control of central government. That should scare you. But perhaps it wouldn't matter so much if Garda powers were limited and subject to strict checks and balances. And certainly you might think, in the light of the Morris revelations, that we would be working hard in that direction. But in fact, we've been doing the exact opposite. Ever since Morris, we have overdosed on draconian crime control measures, and we're still binging remorselessly. Driven on by certain sections of the media, we have become addicted to criminal legislation as the solution to all of our ills, real and imagined. We're spewing out these measures so fast that it's impossible to subject them to the necessary democratic scrutiny. That should be sufficient in itself to set the alarm bells ringing. But what's even more disturbing is that many of them are so detailed and complex that they're virtually incomprehensible, impenetrable to all but a select or exclusive band of professional experts. That is inconsistent with the basic principle of legality upon which our system of law and democracy is supposed to be based. Keep going in that direction and you'll end up with a regime in which your liberty, privacy, personal and property rights are subject to a regime dependent on what Lord Hailsham, of all people, once referred to as the rule of an elective dictatorship rather than the rule of law. And that's the direction we're going. Despite the lessons of Morris, we're rapidly remodelling our police and criminal justice system into a coercive apparatus of centralised social, political and economic control. Let me highlight just one example. Since Morris, unbelievably, we have given Gardaí extensive new powers of surveillance. They can now authorise themselves to sneak into your home and plant a bugging device, which will then be used to watch and listen to you in the privacy of what you consider to be your own home. And then they can sneak back in again and remove it without you ever knowing that it or they were there. Unless, of course, they make themselves a cup of tea while they were in getting it. There are few powers more symptomatic of a police state than that. And to crown it all, there's a blanket prohibition on the disclosure of information about any such surveillance operation. I could go on for hours with more examples. And to make matters worse, we've not complemented these powers with effective accountability checks and balances. The reforms that were introduced in response to Morris have given us merely the appearance of accountability. The substance is lacking. Take ministerial control over the Garda, for example. It exposes the immense powers and resources of the Garda to improper influence from those in government, and through them from less visible but no less powerful private vested interests in the state, and indeed beyond the state. And despite what MacGill says, it does not deliver the quid pro quo of democratic accountability to the people. Successive ministers for justice, including MacGill himself, have been notoriously reluctant to discharge that accountability function in what I would consider any meaningful manner. They simply refuse to account or accept responsibility for Garda operations. When pressed, they say these are a matter for the Garda authorities, who of course don't appear in the Dáil to answer questions about what it is they did do or what it is they didn't do in any particular operation. Now, it doesn't take much imagination to realise that that approach leads to an unhealthily cosy relationship between police and government at your expense. What then about the Garda complaint system? It was first introduced in 1986 and did not work because of inherent flaws. It was reformed in 2005, and it still doesn't work effectively because there are still flaws. It's about to be reformed again, but you can be sure it'll still not work perfectly or effectively because there will still be flaws, and then there'll have to be further reforms, and so the merry dance goes on. Closely associated with all this is the lack of transparency in Irish policing. The Garda is one of the most secretive police forces in the democratic world. Most of their law enforcement policies are confidential, for no good reason other than a cult of secrecy. They don't publish regular and coherent data on the exercise of powers of arrest, stop and search, entry, search and seizure, surveillance, and so on. So we have no way of knowing how or to what extent these powers are being used. Is it any wonder we are here yet again with a sense of crisis about policing? So what's to be done? Well, as Michael very powerfully pointed out, much of the attention has focused lately on the need for a Garda authority. And unlike Michael, as he correctly predicted, I agree that that is an essential part of the way forward. And it is encouraging that the government is including it in its reforms. But will it be designed and delivered in the form and substance necessary to do the job that needs to be done? Will it take over the reins of policing from the Department of Justice? Will it be sufficiently independent of government? Will it be sufficiently representative of all relevant groups and interests in society? Will its members have the necessary expertise and commitment to deliver an efficient, effective and accountable police service? Will they have the necessary powers and resources to do so? And the list goes on. This is a very complex subject, and I agree very much with Michael on that. There's no quick fix to this, and there's a lot of dangers lurking in there. And a Garda authority is only one part of the wide-ranging reforms that are needed. As I've already indicated, we urgently need a comprehensive human rights audit of Garda powers. We must limit their capacity for abuse. Yes, we need yet another overhaul of the complaint system, and we need a major injection of transparency into Garda policies and practices. But perhaps most critical of all, we need yet another fundamental overhaul of Garda education and training. Only this time, it must deliver a human rights-based programme that is capable of equipping every member of the Garda, from the newest recruit right up to commissioner rank, with the necessary knowledge, skills and values to deliver an efficient and ethical police service on a daily basis. And that needs to be complemented with transparent promotions and personnel procedures, which actually reward efficiency and commitment to ethical values, and actually punishes neglect, abuse and bullying. These matters are vital to change internal Garda culture, which is a potent contributor to much of the incompetence and corruption that we have been witnessing. And yes, we must ensure that Gardaí are rewarded appropriately. Policing is the most vital of all public services. It's also one of the most complex and challenging jobs in society. Good policing should be rewarded accordingly. Now, given the range and substance of what needs to be tackled, it is surely not realistic to rely on the Department of Justice or the government of the day to get us from where we are now to where we need to be. The obvious conflicts of interest are sufficient in themselves to make this a non-runner. It is less than 10 years since Michael McDowell introduced the Garda Síochána Act 2005 in response to the Morris revelations. And he claimed then, rightly, that it was the first fundamental reform of Garda governance and accountability structures in the history of the state. But just a couple of months ago, Pat Rabbitte made exactly the same claim for the current government reforms. And the reality, of course, is that the job is too big for piecemeal and limited reforms that are dressed up as comprehensive, fundamental and lasting. What is needed is a comprehensive, considered, evidence-based and forward-looking inquiry into all aspects of policing in this country. And the object must be to define a vision for Irish policing for the next 50 years, and to identify the joined-up reforms that will be necessary to deliver on that vision in an increasingly diverse society based on respect for human rights and the rule of law. We urgently need a Patton-style commission, chaired by someone like Maurice Hayes with a broad-based team of experts. They must be given the powers, the resources and the time to conduct the type of fundamental and forward-looking review of policing that most other common law countries have benefited from at least once in the past 50 years. Chairman, unless we change course in that direction, we'll be back here in 5 years' time, conducting the same debate on the basis of the same sound bites with the same result. The Garda deserves better. We deserve better. And we can do better. Thanks very much for your patience.